So we're back with Story of the Day and Casper by Michael Morpurgo, and the chapter is A Ghost in the Mirror. I cried myself to sleep that night. Mr. Freddy was right. The Countess had been like a mother to me. Not that I knew what a real mother was like, but she was certainly the mother I'd always hoped for. I had found her, and now she was gone. I had lost, as well, the first real friend I ever had, the first person they had told me they liked me. I cannot tell you how grateful I have always been to her for that. In all my life I have never known anyone whose light shone so brightly, so brilliantly, and so briefly. The shock of her death stunned everyone. For days afterwards the whole hotel plunged into a deep sadness. I hate to have to admit it, but to begin with, I too was wrapped up in my own grief to notice Casper, nor to think very much about him and what would happen to him now that the Countess was gone. It took Mr. Freddy to jolt me out of my self-pity. "I've been watching you, Johnny lad," he said to me one evening. "You've been moping about the place all day. You've got to buck yourself up, you have. It won't hardly bring her back, will it? And I'm sure it's not what she would have wanted. You know what she'd have wanted. She'd like you to go on looking after that cat of hers, well, as long as you can. For as long as you can. And if you're feeling bad, I think that cat must be feeling too. So go up there, Johnny, and see him. The Countess's rooms are bought and paid for another month at least, so I've been told. I reckon it's your job to look after Casper, till someone from the family comes and fetches him." So that's what I did, and that's when I began to notice how sad Casper had become. That's when I noticed something else too. Every time I went in to be with Casper, it was as if the Countess was right there in the room with me. Sometimes I thought I even smelled her perfume. Sometimes I was sure I heard her humming and singing. More than once, late in the evening, I heard the lullaby playing on the piano. And time again, I thought I caught sight of her in the mirror. But when I turned around, she wasn't there. I knew she had been, though. I was certain of it. I wasn't frightened, not exactly, but it troubled me and made me feel uncomfortable every time I went into her room. It was obvious to me that Casper sensed her presence too. He was not himself at all. He was nervous, anxious. He didn't purr any more. He stopped watching himself, and so far as I could see, he hardly slept. He'd spent hours searching the rooms for the Countess, yowling piteously. He wouldn't eat. He wouldn't drink. He was pining for her. I decided maybe if I took him out more often, for walks in the park, it might help him. He drank from the puddles then, which was something. I tried to reassure him all I could. I told him over and over that everything would be all right. Sitting there on our bench one day, I promised him faithfully that I'd look after him, but I could see he wasn't listening. More and more, he just didn't seem to care. More and more, he just didn't seem to want to go on living. I tried feeding him by hand, but he would only sniff at it and turn away. I tried calf's liver from the kitchen. I tried best beef finely chopped. Nothing worked. Casper was losing weight all the time, losing his sleekness. His coat was beginning to stare. He was already a ghost of his former self. There seemed to be nothing I could do to halt his decline. I knew if it went on like this, it could only end one way. Now I would lie awake at night, not grieving for the Countess any more, but desperately trying to think of some way of saving Casper's life. It was during one of these long, sleepless nights that I had an idea. It occurred to me that it was only in the Countess's rooms that I had felt her presence, that maybe I'd caught her fleeting glimpses of her. Maybe it was the same for Casper. Maybe that was what was troubling him. If I got him out of those rooms somehow, and away from her, then he might be able to possibly forget her. I had it in my head that the only thing to do was to bring Casper up to my little attic room and look after him there. That way I could be with him more often. But I knew from the start there would be problems. Sooner or later, as Mr. Freddy had said, the Countess's relations would come and collect her belongings, and no one knew when that would be. One thing was for sure, they'd be coming to collect Casper too, and they'd expect to find him in her rooms, and if he wasn't there, they'd be bound to ask me where he was. Just about everyone who worked in the hotel knew by now that I'd been looking after Casper. I couldn't say I was keeping him in my room, because that was absolutely forbidden. The rules were very strict. No birds in cages, no goldfish, no cats, no dogs, no mice. In fact, no friends of any kind were allowed in the servants' room, animal or human. Breaking any of the house rules would lead to instant dismissal. Skullface never showed any mercy. I told Mr. Freddy my plan because I knew he'd understand. He said it was far too dangerous to take Casper up there, that I'd be out of a job and on the streets like that if Skullface ever found out. You don't want to risk everything for a cat, Johnny said. Not even for Casper. It was good advice. I thought about it long and hard, but in the end I knew I had no choice. I could not think of any other way of saving Casper. I told everyone in the servants' corridor what I was doing. There was no way I could keep a cat up there in my room and keep it secret from them. One thing was for certain. None of them would snitch me to Skullface. We all hated her far too much. Besides, they all realised just how ill Casper was and they wanted to help. He'd quite become a favourite. Late one evening we all crowded into my room where Mary O'Connell, one of the scullery maids, made us all join hands and make a secret pact not to tell a living soul. Mary was an Irish girl from County Galway. She was a powerful character and persuasive with words. She was very religious-minded, and she made us all swear on the Bible never to say a word. Luke Tandy, a waiter in the Riverside restaurant, said he wouldn't swear on the Bible because he didn't believe in all that religious malarkey. Well, you better believe in something, Luke, Mary told him, wagging her finger. You say a word to a soul, and I'll beat the living daylights out of you, so I will. All I had to worry about now was Skullface herself. She hardly ever made an appearance on our corridor, but we all knew she could come up there at any time. We had to keep an eye out for her, but most of all, we had to get lucky. That same night I crept downstairs, letting myself into the Countess's room, and carried Casper up into his new home in my little attic room. As soon as I got him there, I sat him on the bed beside me and gave him a good talking to. None of your yowling, Casper. If Skullface finds you, we're done for, both you and me. You've got to eat, you've got to get better, you hear me? He didn't yowl, but he didn't eat either. He just lay there curled up on my bed, sleeping, hardly moving. When I left him to go downstairs in the lobby on duty, he took very little notice of me, and he took very little notice of me when I came back either. Mary O'Connell tried to feed him, tried to talk to him, but he wasn't interested. Almost everybody in the corridor had a go. We tried chicken, salmon, even caviar once, anything Mary could filch from the kitchens without being noticed. All of it went uneaten. He wouldn't touch anything, not even his milk. Just in case the Countess's relative turned up, I'd put it about everywhere that we had Casper, that had escaped from the Countess's rooms and could not be found. I made a great song and dance about it, organising a whole search party, pretending to be beside myself with worry, and I asked everyone to keep an eye out for him. Mr. Freddy knew what I was up to, of course, but besides Mary and Luke, all the gang on our corridor, no one else did. So now I could only take Casper for his walk at night time, when hardly anyone was about. I'd hurry out of the way, back through the tradesman's entrance, with Casper hidden under my coat. While we were out in the park, he seemed to perk up for a bit, but it never lasted. Back in my room, he would often curl up again and close his eyes. Often I would hear him sigh deeply, almost as if he wished his breath to be his last. It broke my heart to see him like this, and I felt so utterly helpless. Meanwhile, the Countess's brother and sister came to take away their things. They asked after Casper. I told them, as I told everyone else, that he'd disappeared. In the Countess's sitting room, they stood by the piano for a while and cried on one another's shoulders. I found myself looking again in the mirror, where I'd often caught a ghostly glimpse of the Countess. I did not see her this time, but I felt her presence. I made her a silent promise there and then that I wouldn't let Casper die. As it turned out, Casper didn't die. He was saved. But I have to say it had nothing whatsoever to do with me. In the end, Casper was saved by a happy chance. Purely happy circumstances. I'd seen the Stanton family about in the hotel, but to begin with had paid them little enough attention. They seemed a lot like other rich families that came and stayed for a month or two in the hotel. They were American, father, mother, and little girl. Both parents seemed rather stiff and prim and proper, a bit standoffish, which is my experience, was not like most Americans I met in the hotel. The little girl was different, though. She was about 7 or 8, I guessed, and was always in trouble, always being ticked off by her mother. She was forever wandering off on her own and getting herself lost. As I was soon to learn, getting lost didn't upset her one bit. But it did upset her parents, particularly her mother, whom I'd often see hurrying through the lobby in search of her. It was from her mother one breakfast time that I'd learned the little girl's name. "Elizabeth! I'm looking for Elizabeth!" she said, rushing up the stairs into the lobby from the Riverside restaurant. All of her usual composure had gone. There was a wild and anxious look about her. "She's run off again! Have you seen her? Have you seen her?" Fortunately, Mr. Freddy was nearby. He was always good in these situations. "Don't you worry, Mrs. Stanton. We'll find her for you. She hasn't come through the front door, so she's got to be in the hotel somewhere. Young Johnny will look upstairs, every floor. Johnny, make sure you search every floor thoroughly. And meanwhile, Mrs. Stanton, I'll have a good look down here for her. We'll get her back with you in a jiffy. Lickety-split, you see." He clapped his hands at me. "Off you go, Johnny lad. Yally, yally. Sharp about it now. There's a good lad." An hour later I'd searched every floor of the hotel, high and low, and there was still no sign of her. I was about to check downstairs to see if Mr. Freddy had found her, when I wondered if I should check the servants' corridor through the attic. I thought it was very unlikely that she'd be up there, but Mr. Freddy told me to search every floor. And besides, I remembered my own childhood well enough to know that children like to hide in the most unexpected places, so I climbed the stairs to have a look. From the far end of the corridor, I could see that the door of my room was open, and I knew at once she must be in there. As I stole along the corridor, I could hear her talking inside my room. "Good cat," she was saying. "Nice cat. Beautiful cat." I found her kneeling at the foot of my bed. Beside her was Casper, eating ravenously from his bowl, wolfing down the liver I had left for him, purring like a lion. And tomorrow we'll pick up with the chapter, Who Gives a Fig, Anyway?